Good morning. It is so great to be with you this morning. We have several on our staff today that are serving at the Men's Catalyst weekend, and so I get the honor and privilege of being with you today. It's really awesome for me to be here, and so thank you for joining us. We are in week 3 of our Broken series, and so today we're going to talk about broken dreams. And so if you have your Bibles with you today, we're going to be in the book of Ruth. That is in the Old Testament. It's a little bit more towards the front. And Ruth actually follows the book of Judges. And if you know about Judges, you know it's a really dark time in God's people's lives, in the Israelites' lives. And they've actually really brought this on themselves because God has called them to him and they've decided that they want to be disobedient. And so it brings this darkness over them because then he calls his judgment upon them for being disobedient to try to get them to come back to where they belong. And so we see that over and over in Judges, and they are so rebellious that actually it says in the last chapter of the last verse of the book of Judges, it says this: there was no king in Israel, and everybody did right what was in their own eyes. And so then we get to Ruth, and we turn the page, and here we are in Ruth 1, and what we're going to see is a glimmer of hope begin to shine through the darkness that is existing for the Israelite people. And so what we need to know about hope is this: we experience hope in a couple of different ways. And the first one is this, and what I would call maybe a biblical hope or a godly hope. And that kind of hope is based on changeable people and changeable circumstances. That's the kind of stuff that when we hope something happens, it's the wishful thinking that we have here on this earth. It's things like, well, I hope I get to go to Disney World. Well, we know this, that the weather could come in on our trip to Disney World and could take every ride out and we don't get to go. And that is based on a changeable circumstances. Or we could have this kind of hope, like I had yesterday. I'm an Aggie. And my hope was that we would beat the University of Arkansas. But that was totally based on changeable people who decided not to show up to the game yesterday. And so we have this earthly hope as opposed to this biblical hope that we also have, right? For those of us that call God King, those of us who surrendered our lives to Jesus, we have this biblical, godly hope that is not based on changeable people or circumstances. It's based on an unchangeable, sovereign God. He says about himself, I, the Lord, do not change. And so this kind of hope is based in his character, and it's based in the promises that he gives us through his word. So when he tells us in this word that I am good, that I am kind, that I keep my promises, that I am faithful, that I am true, that I am full of grace and mercy, that I am forgiving, that I love you so much that I gave you my son, and whoever believes in him will have eternal life. I am a God who will not leave you. I will not forsake you. I have your best plan for you. I am always for you. I am the Alpha. I am the Omega. I started this thing, and I'm going to finish this thing. And ultimately, those days when you guys think that I'm going to lose, you got to know something. I got the victory here. And so everything in this godly hope we have rests on that. It rests on his word and what he says about himself. It rests on his promises and that he is unchangeable versus our worldly hope that is changeable on those things. And so we see this in the Bible, and it's very, very important this morning as we talk about broken dreams. Because, see, our broken dreams are attached to our hope. They're things that we hope happen in this life, the things that we've planned for ourselves. And so when those things don't come to fruition, when our worldly hope does not come to fruition, well, then we as followers still have godly hope because that we know that as long as Jesus is still alive, that we always have hope. And so some of you, I don't know, have y'all ever played this game? Like you come to, it's really meant for a big crowd of people. It's an icebreaker. It's meant to take down walls and to get people comfortable and establish some commonality among each other and get some unity going in the room. And I've played it a couple of times before. And what you do is this, essentially. So everybody comes in and they're sitting just like this. And so the MC will come up and they'll say, stand up if you're wearing red athletic shoes. And everybody in the room will stand up that's wearing athletic shoes, and you'll kind of look around and you'll see who's in your boat, who has your same fit going on. And then you'll sit down. And then the next person will come up or they'll say, okay, stand up if you are from out of state. And everybody stands up from out of state. You look around, you sit back down. They'll say, stand up if you've had Raisin Bran this morning for breakfast. And everybody over 50 will stand up You know, y'all are 50. Boy, there's a lot of y'all in this group. You stand up, and then you'll sit back down, and over it goes until you're kind of loose now. You're kind of in this, and you realize, I'm not the only one here that's in this state. I'm not the only one that's right here in this being, and it's really effective on that. And I thought, what if we played this morning in our broken dreams? What if we played, hypothetically speaking, if I said to you, stand up if you've ever had a dream for your life? I think many, if not all, of us would stand up. Because we live in a culture that really proposes and is a proponent of us having dreams, right? I mean, people move to this country because they want to live what? The American dream. You might not have seen someone in a while and you ask them, how are you doing? Their response to you might be, I am living the dream. What do we tell our children when they're young? Have your dreams. Go for your dreams. Don't let anyone take your dreams away from you. And so we have this whole culture that is set on having these dreams and these hopes that we work toward and that we push toward. What if I said, though, stand up if you've ever had your dream broken? I think it's fair to say that the same amount of people would stand up. That most of you, if not all, have experienced those times where the thing that you planned for, the thing that you prayed about, the thing that you worked for, the thing that you put everything you had into it, but it didn't come to fruition, that your dreams were broke. I think there's many of us in here who could identify with that. And so today, know that you're not alone in your broken dreams. We're here together as they happen. And some of these dreams of ours, they've been broken because of no fault of our own. We've done nothing that has done something that might potentially have broken them. See, there's been circumstances or people that might have come along that have done that, but we are basically victims to it. And now there are no more. But it's nothing that we've done. But then there's other dreams of ours that maybe we have something. We have done something in. We have played a part in. We've had careless words. We've had actions or things that have gone to directly affect these dreams that have caused them now to be broken. And we have experienced the consequences of that. And so we have dreams that we've had nothing to do with that have been broken and dreams that maybe we have. It's kind of all over the place in that. So when we talk about these dreams, I wonder what kind of dreams we have in this room. I think it'd be kind of fun to find out if we could holler out, what are your dreams? See, some of you might have dreamed of being married. Or maybe some of you are dreaming of dating. Maybe you even have that one person already, that one guy or that one girl already in your mind of who you want to date. Maybe some of you, maybe you dream of being a parent one day. You want to have children. Maybe some of you are grandparent, or you want to be a grandparent. You hope that your children have children. Maybe some of you have a dream at university, a dream of going to a certain university that you're studying hard and putting it all into. Or maybe you have a dream career. Or maybe there's some writers in here. Y'all got this book that's just circling around and around in your mind. And you have this dream one day of putting it out on paper, maybe even publishing it beyond then. Maybe some of you just dream of having your family get along, that there's relationships, that people would get along and they would come back together, and that brokenness that might be in a relationship is now whole, and you have dreams about that, and you work towards that. And maybe some of you are dreaming that one day you'll get to retire. And in that retirement, you will be financially free and able to go and travel in what you do, that you'll have the health that goes with it, and it'll be everything that you hoped and you dreamed. And when those dreams come true, it is glorious. I've had a dream come true. I was elated. But what happens? What happens when they don't? What happens when that thing that you planned for, that thing that you put everything you had into, what happens when it becomes broken and you now know that it will be no more? You know, sometimes in those dreams, maybe some of us are quick to brush it off, because what happens is when the dream doesn't come anymore, we realize it really wasn't much of a dream. Maybe, and so we just can kind of walk on. And then there's others of us that when we have that broken dream, man, it hurts. There's feelings of resentment and bitterness and anger, but we kind of work our way through that. And when we get to the other side, we can look back at that dream and we say, you know what? That was actually for the best. We look at the perspective on it, because you know what? Let's take a job, for instance. I worked really hard for that promotion. I put in the hours. I trained myself. I looked toward that. I did everything that I knew that I needed to do to that, and it didn't come through. But you know what? Had I done that, the travel that's required of that would have taken me away from friends and family that really I didn't want to give. And so you realize there's probably another job out there for me. There's probably another area that would fit me just as well and wouldn't require that much of me. And so we were able to move forward in that. But then there's those broken dreams. And I think some of you know right now exactly what I'm talking about. They are almost debilitating. So we have people that are disappointed from their dreams to utter devastation in their dreams. They're so disappointing. You do not understand, why didn't this dream come true? You just knew. You did every step that you could. You planned it just exactly right. You did all that the books say that you need to do. You might have even done all that you've even heard when you've been in a community of church what you were supposed to do. And now at the end, it has been shattered. It has been shattered. And so you don't know what to do. And these emotions, these times, they can lead us away from the very heart of God. Because then we question our godly hope. Is he what he says he is? Because our earthly hope, our worldly hope, it's been shattered. So does that mean that our godly hope is in the same condition? Is God still good? Is he still with me? Does he still have plans for me? Is this someone that I can trust? Is he still a sovereign God? And we ask ourselves this: if you are good, then why me? Why didn't this work for me? Or why not me? Why didn't I get to have part in that? Why didn't that happen to me? Why didn't that come to fruition? Why didn't the work that I put into it, why didn't my hope come true in that? You know what I'm talking about. Maybe it's that marriage that was such a dream has ended in divorce. Maybe when you did marry and you were so hoping to become a parent, but you found out you can't have any children. There's those relationships that you've come to realize, man, they're a long, long way from being whole. Maybe that school that you studied, man, you took your high school and you said, no to your social life because I'm going to sit here and I'm going to study because I'm going there. And you didn't get accepted. Maybe you even lost someone to death too early, too soon. The dreams you had for them, the dreams you had for your relationship in them. So what happens? What happens to us when dreams become broken? Weston made a statement the first week of this week 1 of this Broken Come As You Are series. He said this. He says, we will all have a response in our brokenness. So it's very important to us today when we talk about broken dreams is to ask ourselves, what is your response in your broken dream? What is your response in your broken dream? This morning, we're going to go into the book of Ruth. We're going to look at a life of a woman named Naomi. And we're going to see that in Naomi's life, she too had some broken dreams, and we're going to see what her response is to it. And so we're in Ruth 1:1, and here's what it says. During the time of the judges, there was a famine in the land. A man left Bethlehem in Judah with his wife and 2 sons to stay in the territory of Moab for a while. The man's name was Elimelech, and his wife's name was Naomi. The names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah. They entered the fields of Moab, and they settled there. So follow me here for just a second. Here's what's going on. This family was in the time of Judges. They were coming under the judgment of God where they had the famine was going on. And so this family decides to move to another area to escape the famine. Now, we don't know because we have to look at what is just right here in Scripture. But we don't know what caused them to move. We don't know that God maybe said, hey, he called them out. You're going to go move to Moab. Or they themselves might have come up with this idea, or Elimelech might have decided. He was a husband, and at that culture and time and history, men were pretty much the decision makers, and women did what they thought they needed to do as far as following their husbands on that. And so we don't know. We can kind of guess. There's a lot of theological thoughts on this. We kind of guess that probably they moved outside of where God was having them live because this is the promised land they originally live in. And they are taking themselves out of it and moving themselves to a different place. And so let me show you on this map exactly so you can kind of get a context of where they're at. Because all we know in this scripture, it says that they moved from one place to get out of the famine and they moved down to Moab. So here's a map of the place. So they are in Jerusalem, the Beth. It's right near the Jerusalem area. And they move all the way down here, go down around the Dead Sea, and they're going to move into the land land of the Moabites. That's where they're headed. And all that colored area you see that isn't pink, that's the land God promised them. That's the land of Canaan. That's the land that God had moved his people to, and he had settled them there. And all those people residing there are under this rebellion, and so they're experiencing this famine. This family moves out, and they go down to Moab. So that lets you know about what they're doing at this place. And Moab might kind of sound familiar to you. Do you remember the story of Sodom and Gomorrah? So that's about Abraham has this nephew, and his name's Lot. And he and his family live in Sodom and Gomorrah. And God comes to Abraham, and he says, Abraham, there's nobody righteous living in this city, so I'm going to destroy it. And so Abraham pleads on behalf of Lot and his family. He says, at least let me save Lot. Let me tell him to get out. And God says, okay, but you tell him when he moves out, he better not look back, because if he does, he'll turn to salt. And so here Lot and his family go, and they're trying to escape the destruction that is impending upon Sodom and Gomorrah. And the wife looks back, and she turns to salt. They keep going. Lot and his daughters ultimately live in a cave. As they're in a cave, Lot gets drunk, and a grievous sin is about to be committed, because Lot's daughters decide we need heirs. They take that into their own hands, and they sleep with their father while he is drunk, and they both become pregnant. And do you know what the oldest daughter's son's name is? Moab. And that's where this country gets its start, and its land gets its start. So the Israelites and the Moabites don't have this good beginning. It's not a will of God that the Moabites would have come about. And so while they might become friends here and there, as a whole, they have now moved to a land that God didn't bless, that God didn't bring that upon, and they've moved themselves there. And so this is where they find themselves. So here's Naomi and her family in Moab. And so let's see what happens after they get there. Verse 3. Naomi's husband Elimelech dies, and she was with her 2 sons. Her sons took Moabite women as their wives. One was named Orpah, and the second was named Ruth. And after they lived in Moab about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion, these are Naomi's sons, they die as well. And Naomi was left without her 2 children and her husband. Sometimes when I read the Bible, I think I might get a callousness to it over and over when it comes to the people, because I forget that these people are just like us. This is tragic, what has happened to her. These people, they experience the same emotions as us. They get happy, they get sad, they get fearful, they get doubtful, they get frustrated, and they experience grief, very deep grief. And so this woman and this man originally set out to save their family from a famine, and they get down there, and not only does her husband die, but her 2 children die as well. Her dreams are broken. Her dreams are broken. Think of what she as a mom is feeling at this point, that now that what she thought once would happen, the dream of having a family, the dream of having grandchildren, the dream of everybody growing old together and having dinners together and being on events together and having grandchildren, and these grandchildren getting to go into their events and their high school graduations and at holiday times of coming together and watching a family grow and learn and enjoy life is no more. And not only that, she is a woman, and a woman at the time had no way to support herself, not one at all. So now she is not only without a husband and her 2 sons that could take care of her. The men in the family were responsible for that. She now has absolutely no money. She's destitute, and they're hungry. They're hungry. They even need just their food. And she has now got to figure out what to do. And once what seemed so promising now is shattered all about her. So what do we see Naomi do? Verse 6. This is how Naomi's going to respond to her broken dream in her life. She and her daughter-in-law set out to return from the territory of Moab because she had heard in Moab that the Lord had paid attention to his people's needs by providing them food. She left the place where she had been living, accompanied by her 2 daughter-in-laws, and she traveled the road leading back to Judah. So in her despair, in her brokenness, something happens. Now, Naomi is an Israelite woman, so she knows about God, but it's been 10 years since she's been back up in that area. But now she has heard about the provision of God. She hears in her brokenness what God is capable of doing. She's reminded of what God does. So it comes from, you know what it comes from? It comes from a bunch of people that are receiving blessing from the Lord, that are receiving provision from the Lord, that are receiving sustenance from the Lord. They are telling those stories to other people. They are telling of the goodness of God. They are telling of the greatness of God. They are saying that once we were hungry, but now we are full, that God has come and that God is providing what we need. Do you see the lesson here? for a world that is hurting, for a world that is broken, for people in your lives. They need to hear about the good works of the Lord. They need to hear how God came to you right when you needed him most. They need to hear about that once you were lost, but now that you are found. They need to hear that you were a sinner saved by grace and that they can be too. They need to know those times when you didn't know how you were going to pay your bill, but the check of some sort just showed up in the mail. They need to know about those times when you were hurt and you were angry that God brought a friend just right to you that could comfort you and that would walk through with you during those tough times. See, this is the stuff that Naomi's hearing, and she's hearing about this hope. She's being reminded about the godly hope we have, that when you feel down, you are not out. And she hears that, and there's people all around us in our life that God has placed us that we, for some reason, have this tendency to keep closed about that. We keep it as a secret, and we forget that there's people that need to hear this, that need to be encouraged. We need one another. We need to tell our stories. We need to tell about the faithfulness of God, the trustworthiness of God. And while it seems that he's not working, that he is. And while it's quiet around you, he's working in your weight because you've experienced it. So where has God worked in your life? What has he done for you? What's the time, at that time, where did he grip your heart? What's his activity? And who can you tell? Who can you tell? Because there's stories we need to tell to encourage people in their own brokenness, just like Naomi. And so once Naomi heard of this provision that God was making for his people, she does something. This is her response. She chooses to get on the road back home. She doesn't stay where she's at in her misery, in her brokenness. She turns back toward him. Listen, when your dreams are broke, I know this from experience. Your tendency might be to turn your back. Why did you let that happen? I just knew this is what you had for my life and you didn't do this. Are you still good? This is hard. This is too hard, and I don't know what it's going to look like from here. I don't know that I can do this. I don't know that I can follow you. Those are the thoughts that can come up in some of us in our broken dreams about who God is, and it wars with our faith. And there's nothing the enemy would like more than have you say, you know what, I'm done. I'm finished. I'm walking away from you on that. There's nothing more than he would like that. In these broken dreams, you and I have a choice. We have a choice too, because there's a road that's paved right in front of us. And we could turn towards him, or we could stay right where we're at. I was thinking about Naomi and this trip that she took back. Now remember, she's now a widow. She's got 2 girls that are with her and one that ultimately will make the final trip back with her. But she's hungry and she's broken in herself and has no money. And here they're going. And do you know how many miles they're going to have to go, these 2? They're going to go over 60 miles that they're going to have to walk back and go back home. Don't you imagine that trip was a little harder than you might have thought it was? Don't you imagine the fear she probably felt for her own safety? Don't you imagine the doubt that she might have had as she turned back to him? Because it wasn't like right then God was like, ta-da, everything is fantastic. You are great. You can turn it all around. It wasn't that. It was another hard day she had to do. It was a choice that she had to make, but she had to make a day that still was filled with hurt and was still with fear and was still filled with doubt. But she knew this. We know this by her actions, that Naomi believed in the sovereignty of God. She believed it. She turned in it, and whether she might have felt it or not, that's another thing. She believed it. So whether you believe in what's going on, that is the best thing you could do, because your feelings, that is not truth. The truth is God is sovereign and that you can walk towards him. And so listen to this for us. God gives us these promises, and this is what Naomi believed. In Psalm 34:18, here's one of them, and especially for those of us that are broken-hearted in these broken dreams. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted. He saves the crushed in spirit. Many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivers them out of them all. And this is so important for us that call Jesus our King, because our hope is not tied to our circumstances. It's tied to the promises of God. So when things don't go well in your life, those earthly hopes that you have, those worldly hopes that you have, when they don't come to being, when they become broken, our hope and our trust is not really ultimately tied to that. It's tied into the hope we have in God. And so no matter what it looks like, even if it is now no more in this broken dream, we know that we have this God that we serve, that he will do something in spite of that. that he is bigger than that he has overcome that nothing has victory over him, and he has the victory, because we don't lose our hope and our trust in our circumstances, because we put it all in Jesus. Now, hear me say this. I don't know the timeline of your broken dreams and the healing you would have from them in this world. I don't know. It would be different for everyone. I don't know God's sovereign choice as you turn and you walk back toward him during those times. I don't know what it looked like. Some of you, it could be pretty quick, and some of you, it could last a long time. And some of you might actually have that dream come back and be realized in this life. And some of you might not realize it at all. It might be when you get to glory that God has done something really cool when you aren't here anymore. I don't know what it looks like, but I do know this. And it's what we all anchor ourselves in. I know this in Romans 8:28. You know this too. For all of us that love him and are called according to his purpose, he'll work everything out. There's nothing that he won't do in this. I know that in 2 Corinthians 4:8-9, it says this: we are hard pressed on every side, but we're not crushed. I know we're perplexed. We don't know what's going on, but we're not in despair. I know that we could be persecuted, but we're not abandoned. And I know we could feel like we're struck down, and we are struck down in some sense, but that we are not destroyed because Jesus is still living. I know this, that it says it from John in Revelation 21, it says this, that one day, in this hardness, in this brokenness, when our dreams don't come true, that you know what he's going to do one day? One day, he's going to wipe every tear from our eyes. And there's not going to be any death. There won't be any mourning. There won't be any crying. There won't be any pain, because the old order of things has passed away, because that stuff here on this earth has passed away, and he will make everything new. And I know that he says this, that he's trustworthy and true, and that you can even write it down. You could write his promises down, and you could keep track of them, because he is faithful and he will keep them all. Well, ultimately, Naomi trusted in the promise of God, and she turned and she walked back to him. And as a matter of fact, even though it was a hard road back, and I don't even know the time frame, but when she gets back, her daughter-in-law, Ruth, actually marries a wonderful man in the name of Boaz. And he takes wonderful care of Ruth, but not only Ruth, he takes care of Naomi, and he provides for her needs. And God provides exactly what those women need in his care and in his provision. And those, Ruth and Boaz, end up having a son, and his name is Obed, and Naomi gets to become the grandmother and gets to walk alongside them as well. And so the life that she gets to now live has been provided for by God. But you know what's even cooler? That Naomi, when she goes off into glory, she dies and she goes off into glory, some really cool stuff happens in her life that she never was even aware of. Because that grandson, Obed, he actually will become the father of Jesse. Jesse is the father of King David. Do you know who the ancestor of King David ultimately will be? Jesus. Do you think that day, when she was in her despair, do you think she had any clue what God would ultimately do? See, this is such a truth. Listen, we never know what God might do in our broken dreams. We never know what he might do in and through our broken dreams. But it could be glorious. Do you know when she was sitting there and she was contemplating her choice, her response to this broken dreams, and she hears about the work of the Lord and she decides, I'm going back home. I'm going to be faithful to him. I'm going to walk toward him. I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't know what it's going to happen. I don't think in her wildest dreams she could have ever known that her life would have part in bringing out the Savior of the world. No way that she could have known that. But that's who God is. That's who sovereign God is, who always has victory and always has the last day. Naomi not only trusted God's sovereignty in her brokenness, there's someone else that I love this story about that trusted as well. And it's a true story. And some of you that are University of Arkansas Razorback fans, God has such a sense of humor, y'all, because this has been written a while ago. And I'm talking about the Razorbacks. It is so tender right here. But here we go. Let me tell you this great story that has touched my life. There was a young man when he was about 12 years old. His name was Brandon Burlsworth. Brandon decides about 12 years old that he wants to surrender his life to Jesus. And so he does. And he becomes extremely faithful. And everything he does moves through his faith. And people all around his life are touched by him. They're inspired by him. And they see the choices he makes, and they see how he lives, and they see his ups and downs. He's got a pretty hard life. But he still follows Jesus, and he's very impactful. Another thing he does at about that same exact age, he decides he's going to play D1 football at the University of Arkansas. He's going to be a Razorback. Now, his family and friends thought the first idea was incredible. Yes, receive the gift of Jesus. That's all yours. But they looked at Brandon and they said, I'm not thinking you look like what an aspiring D1 athlete would look like. I mean, Brandon didn't have the lifestyle at 12, and it didn't look like maybe what an athlete that would play at that level could actually be. But that didn't deter Brandon. And so Brandon, over these next few years, he worked extremely hard. He was faithful in his own faith with the Lord, but he was faithful in his discipline and the way he practiced and the things that he did in his life. And do you know what happened? His freshman year, while he didn't get a scholarship offer from University of Arkansas, he did get them from some other schools because he became a phenomenal player in high school. He got some other offers. He said no to those because what was his dream? It was to play at the University of Arkansas, and he would not give it up. He tried, but his mom wouldn't let him. And so he decided to walk on to the University of Arkansas football team, and he made it. But here's the key about him having to walk on. His family was really poor. And so what his family did was they put a second mortgage on their home just so they could get enough money to give his finances to support him that first year. But it all rode on Brandon's shoulders that first year because they had no money for him to keep going that second year into the sophomore year and then on. So Brandon had to play the best he could, and he had to get a scholarship going into his sophomore year. Well, lo and behold, true to Brandon fashion, true to how he worked and what he did, Brandon got a scholarship his sophomore year, and he became one of the best players of the University of Arkansas Razorbacks. And by his senior year, he did so fantastic that he got drafted by the Indianapolis Colts. His dream was totally realized. And 3 weeks before he was supposed to go to the Indianapolis Colts, his mom calls and asks him to go to church service with her on a Wednesday night. And he says, absolutely, Mom, I'll come. And so as he's about to go to meet her for that, he has some friends that come to him and say, hey, Brandon, go with us, wherever they were going. He says, no, he's a faithful man. No, I told my mama I was going to come do this, and I'm going to go to church with my mama. So he gets in the car. He takes a trip he's done jillions of times from the university back home, which was about an hour away, on the windy mountain road. And when he does, he gets in a fatal car crash. A young man that was so faithful. But he got to realize his dreams in his life. But what about the dreams his family and his friends had for him? They're shattered. They saw what God had already done in all these lives, but now it's gone. What? One of the good ones? So young? And so this family was very, very faithful, but he had this brother named Marty. And Marty, he really struggled with this. He did exactly what many of us would do, and he contemplated turning away from the Lord, and because he didn't understand why God would allow this to happen. He didn't understand why this young man who lived so passionately for him and had these dreams that were set out, and the dreams that were becoming realized, that they were no more. And now this family and his friends had this hope of what could have been in his life, of going on to the professional football league, and then to maybe having his own family, and just to have the workings that could keep going on. And in the end, this family decided, you know what? God is still who he says he is. God is still faithful. God is still trustworthy. And so as they come together and they decided what to put on Brandon's headstone, they wrote something that has affected me, that it sticks with me when times are hard and when dreams become broken. They wrote this: our loss is great, but God is greater. Naomi learned that same truth, that her loss was great, but God was greater. Listen, there's no negating that what you have experienced maybe in your broken dreams, that your loss is great, but God is greater. So Brandon dies. They have the funeral. A little time passes. Guess what happens out of that life? Guess what God does out of that life? Guess how he keeps the dreams going? Here's a picture of Brandon. Look at those glasses. That's part of his story. When Brandon dies, because of the faith he lived, guess what happens? In Arkansas, there's a foundation that is set up in Brandon's name. It gives glasses to underprivileged children every single year. They have given away thousands and thousands of glasses away to children. There is now an award for the walk-on of the year in the college, in collegiate football. It's named after Brandon Burlsworth. There is now an athletic camp that students can go to in Arkansas that teaches faith first, and then it teaches athletic ability, all under Brandon's name. And then if that's not even enough, how the dream keeps unfolding and unfolding and unfolding, there's a movie made about Brandon's life, and it is on Netflix. I would not recommend almost anything on Netflix, but I recommend this movie. It's Greater is what it's called, and it is about Brandon's life, and some of you have seen that, and you will not be sorry. Watch it. Watch it. And from his story, I know my life has been touched. My faith has been increased. My hope has been reassured that while my dreams may be broken, that my loss might be great, that God is still greater. Will you pray with me? Heavenly Father, what you say about yourself is so true. That you are kind, that you are good, that you love us deeply, that you see us and that you hear us and that you're for us and you won't leave us, you won't forsake us, and you are true to us. And so thank you today, Father. Thank you for reminding us that where our hope should be placed, that while we do have these things in this world that we hope for, that our ultimate hope is in you, and that the response that when those become broken, Lord, are just to turn back and take one step at a time right back to you, even in the hardness of it, Lord, that you're still faithful. And so God, I'd say, would you take these words today? Would you take your truth today? Would you write it on our hearts? Would you help us to be people that are faithful? People that are faithful that would tell our stories so other people can become faithful. Because God, we are not telling of things that might happen. We are telling people of truth, of who you are, of your sovereignty and your supremacy. And so may you get all the glory. May you get all the honor, Lord, because you are great. And it is in your son's name I pray. Amen.